Hello, everyone. Welcome in to the Target Smart Podcast. I'm Anthony Sanfilippo, joined as always by your host, Albert Morales. Albert, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, bud. Um, Lots to talk about, Anthony. This week we are actually breaking from our tradition, given that we have so much material to cover on the debate. This episode, we're going to focus on recapping what I think 80 million Americans watched Monday night or Tuesday night, rather.
Yeah.
The Thrilla in Manila. you could, you could.
The Thrilla in Philly. It was in Philly. It was here. I got to tell you, Albert, as someone who was commuting around the city that day, it caused more traffic headaches leading into that debate than I've ever experienced in my life. Like, unbelievable. Unbelievable. It was like the city was in gridlock because of the debate.
Was it convention type traffic or?
Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't even that it was that, because I mean, obviously nobody was allowed into the building for the debate other than the production staff for ABC and the people that were involved with both campaigns were there. But that whole area, so where that is filmed, it's right across the street or a block away from Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell, right? So you're talking about Fifth and Market. That's right in the downtown part of Philadelphia. From the afternoon on a work day, they were shutting down streets all in that area, and so it created a total gridlock downtown. And then if you're trying to get in off the highway, off of I-95 to get downtown, it was a nightmare to get down there as well. So anybody who was trying to get anywhere in Philadelphia for the better part of 5 hours, I will say, you couldn't go anywhere. It was just awful. It was an awful traffic experience. But hey, we got to host the debate.
Hey, there you go. And I was taking. I hadn't been following the debate as closely. We're all busy right now, but in the lead up to the debate, there was no audience. I'd heard about the mics and the negotiations, whether the mic was on versus off. But I did know there was going to be an empty studio outside of the moderators. That was interesting.
Yeah. I will tell you, I was at night, late at night. I was actually after. It was well after the debate was officially, or I shouldn't say well after, but after the debate was officially over. I was driving in town and I saw so many people, like in suits, out and about on the streets of Philly, like outside, like not too far from there. So I'm wondering how many people were actually trying to just be there to catch a glimpse, or were all gathering together at like some kind of outside, watch party kind of thing or whatever. It was the city was buzzing at 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night, with a lot of people still, dressed in their work clothes, which is rare at that time of day. So there had to be some kind of real feel in the city that people wanted to watch it and see it. So when you say like 80 million Americans watched it, they did. They absolutely did. And that's evidence of that was available on the streets of Philadelphia at 11 o'clock at night, 11:30 at night, because they were still out and about in the same clothes that they went to their office in that day, which is something you don't normally see at that hour. So it was definitely something that a lot of people were interested in. I watched it on replay. Mostly. I caught the funny, I watched it a little bit backwards. I caught the end first and then went back and watched the beginning. So I watched it a little bit out of order because I wasn't able to actually see the beginning of it, but live. But I was just as fascinated as everybody else was, I think, Albert, from what took place. I mean, there was no question, no matter which side of the aisle that you're on, no matter how far to one side or far to the other you are, and if you think anything else, you're delusional. But Kamala Harris won that debate and won it handily. It was a TKO if you're using boxing references, right? It's a technical knockout. Like it was completely a one-sided victory in my mind for how that thing went.
I kept thinking about that part in the movie where in Rocky Four, when Apollo's trainer wants to throw the towel, but this started early. It was like 10 minutes in. I'm like, throw the towel, throw the towel. But hey, before we get into what we're gonna cover today, which is a debate, I just want to let our folks know that next week we will be joined by Matt Engel, president and founder, CEO of the Lone Star Project in Texas. If there is ever anyone who needs to be credited for fighting the good fight for the last 20 plus years of trying to turn Texas blue, it is Matt Engel. He's legend. He's former chief of staff to my old boss Martin Frost, who got me my first paid gig in politics many moons ago. Lots happening in Texas, as you know, Anthony. Every 4 years we inch up. We get 3-5 points on average in the presidential race, and I think Trump won it by like 5 last cycle. I think probably he'll win it by 2 this go around. But again, 2028 is going to be huge. But there's also a big Senate race this year against Ted Cruz, a man who nobody seems to like. So it'll be interesting if Trump's coattails are long enough to carry him across the finish line. But anyway, that said, back to the debate. So Anthony, that first question centered around the economy. You can almost predict the question, right? Are you better off than where you were 4 years ago? And of course, Vice President Harris hits it out of the park by laying out her immediate plan of providing small businesses with a $50,000 tax deduction, and then by increasing the child tax credit, I think, to $6,000, and reminding folks that she's about the people and Donald is about himself. And then, this is where Trump just, I think this is where he had that moment where, or it may have come in later in the debate, where they asked him about his plans. He says, well, I have concepts of a plan. I don't know if you were a Simpsons watcher, but it reminded me of that episode when Bart Simpson doesn't do his book report and the teacher calls him out on it.
Yes.
And he's like, I don't know. It was pure theater. I mean, it was comedy because it was just, she was beating the crap out of him, and it was just this mixture of emotions that you get like from an action movie to a comedic scene. What was your take on that?
I knew he was in trouble right away because he couldn't stay on topic. Yeah. And it really came to the point where it was, you want to make, if he wanted to make his arguments for each of those individual talking points, you need to wait for that question to come up rather than sit there and just start rambling on about 6,000 other things that have nothing to do with the economy. So when she answers that and she gives that response, if he would have given some kind of counter to what she said, then you get there and sit there and go, okay, maybe he could get a point here, or maybe, she might win this question, but, he can hang in. But he completely took it off the rails and went on to other topics. And it's like, you lost when you don't have focus on the first question of a debate, just structurally don't have focus on the first question of a debate. There's no way in heck that you're going to be able to regain that focus for the remainder of the debate. So, and I think that she knew that, which was why later on she was able to basically play rope-a-dope with him and basically goad him into saying things, take the bait and say things that were so outlandish that she didn't have to really go any further with any specifics on details. It really became an attack of him, and he sunk himself by taking that bait. And if he didn't, then she probably would have gotten back onto more specifics on policies. Whereas she really she gave a good answer on that first answer. And then he, on his own, took himself completely out of the conversation, and she had the wherewithal to realize, I don't need to win each question this way. He's going to sink himself throughout this debate, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, well, I went back and watched it again just for the purposes of this episode, and I didn't realize, but she baited him with every question. Like that very first question on the economy,
Yep.
she labels him with the Trump sales tax.
Yeah.
You know, she just plants it, and he just comes out of the gate, hook, line, and sinker. It's like, you know, you're watching those fishing shows on Animal Planet, whatever, and that big tuna fish just goes after the bait, and it's like it's over because he starts defending him. So there's no Trump tax cut. I don't have a Trump tax increase, and he just loses. He never gets to answer the questions because he wasn't prepared, but B, he just can't help himself, and that was comical.
The most, and this is an overarching thing because it carried through the entire debate, regardless of topic. But the overarching thing that she did so well was to needle him on things that he would perceive as making it look like he had a negative, right? So every time it was the time, like when she talked about how people would leave his rallies early because it's boring, right? That is completely irrelevant for the conversation of a debate. But she knew that he would, because it's all about him, that it was going to be, wait a second. People don't leave my rallies. My rallies are great. And you're going to waste 2 minutes talking about your rallies that has nothing to do with the American people want to listen to and discuss at this, hear you talk about at this debate. So, like, to me, it was so strategically well planned with that it didn't matter at that point. Like he lost so quickly, and like you say, he should have thrown in the towel early. There was no recovering because it was all about attacking his ego. And once his ego was being attacked, he was never going to get back on track because it was all about defending his ego.
Well, another thing that was, I think, highlighted was his lack of knowledge on any substance, right? Because after the sales tax, debacle where he just loses it and goes after Kamala for whatever. I think the following question had to do with tariffs, and she nailed it. She goes right in. What people need to know is that a tariff is just another tax on. It's a regressive tax, I think, is what the phrase she may have used, but he just didn't. He didn't know how to articulate that. He just kept mumbling something about how the tariffs that he set in place were kept in by the Biden-Harris administration, and then never really answered any of the questions. But we'll leave that one there. When the moment that I knew this was going off the rails was the following question when they finally brought up the issue of abortion, and then he goes on to allege that Kamala Harris would somehow approve an abortion after birth. And even that's when the moderator came in and started doing the fact checking. And the right is all up in arms about Trump getting fact checked. But I'm like, you know what? If you didn't lie, you wouldn't have to get fact checked. That's why the vice president didn't get fact checked, because he didn't lie. Here's Trump telling people that Democrats are out there, performing abortions after, all the way up to the ninth month, and it just doesn't happen. But I don't know if you caught that.
Well, I completely caught it, and the thing of it is that this is evidence that he gets told something by somebody, conspiracy theorist, whatever. He gets told something, and he runs with it without vetting it, because he looks at it and says, "Well, I could just say this, and people will get riled up about it." And that's not necessarily true, because you can only go so far, right? With something that would be an exaggeration of the truth. And taking it to this level is an exaggeration of the truth that is beyond even what, if you were like an undecided voter or a swing voter, and you see such an exaggeration of the truth, you have to sit there and say to yourself, is that what I want in office? Is that what I want leading this country? That it's going to take something that is a conspiracy theory and run with it without making sure that it was true before you said it in front of 80 million people? Like, that's the thing that's just so fascinating to me, that he doesn't have that, or didn't have that preparation. Like, you can't go into a debate and say something without preparing it. It's like, and I got to imagine, in a lot of ways, I feel for the people who are responsible for, his campaign and getting him ready for that. Because I got to imagine that they are sitting there banging their heads on the table when he says the outlandish things that he says. Because for a fact, Albert, that none of that was prepared. Like, they did not put that into his head to say, oh, definitely say this during the debate. Yeah, this will go well. Do that. They can't be that stupid, right?
Oh, it's hard to not. It's hard to not think about cognitive decline, right? At this stage, he's almost 80 years old, and it could very well be a case where he just can't retain that talking point anymore, because he's used to just railroading over his competition in these in these debates. But I mean, I was just I was really surprised by his lack of preparation. He wouldn't look at her. Did you notice that too? He just wouldn't make any eye contact with her at all, and she's there just beating the living crap out of him. And I don't know if he was finally intimidated, what it was, but after again the abortion episode, or that question, I thought, okay, surely he's going to start getting he's getting warmed up here. He's going to finally stick to a message, but he clearly never did. And
no, his if we're fair on this podcast, if there was at any point, the only thing I could sit there and say that he finally got onto his message wasn't until the last thing he said at the end of the debate, with the whole, if you were going to make these changes, you should have done it in the last 4 years, right? Why didn't you do it? That's his message that I think probably works for his people. But he didn't do that until 88 minutes into the thing. For the first 88 minutes, he stumbled all over himself and threw out wild conspiracy theories. And you sit there and go, that can't be a guy that can run this country at this point. Like that, like, right? I mean, if you're trying to if you're being fair and you're trying to make an argument for the other side, you have to stick to what would work and what would make sense. You can't just throw stuff on the wall and hope it sticks and have it be something that's incredibly ridiculous. And that's kept where he kept going. And that's why, the one thing, and I give Kamala Harris a ton of credit for this. Like, her facial reactions to the stuff he was saying, and things that can be turned into social media memes, like when she put her hand on her chin and it's like smiling at him, like, this is the most ludicrous thing I've heard in my lifetime. Like, that's brilliant, because that's what's going to be out there, and that's what people are going to see and be like, she's far more capable of a human being to understand the role of this job than this guy is, and this crazy guy is, right? So I think that all of that kind of fits together. Like I said, he only his final 2 minutes did he say anything that I sat there and said, well, that's what he should have been saying all along. He would have done much better in this debate. But by that point, the 10 count had already been made. He's already lost the match. He's walking back to the dressing room at that point, bloodied, and he's, oh yeah, but there's this one last thing. Okay, great, buddy. You already lost. Yeah, you missed your opportunity. So that's how I interpreted it, and I thought she was so good at doing it the way she did it.
Yeah, it almost sounds, Anthony, like we're critiquing a movie. What was the name of that famous
Roger
show on
Siskel and Ebert?
Siskel
and Ebert on Saturdays.
Yeah. It really does sound like we're critiquing a movie because it's just straight out of a movie. You can't make it up.
Correct.
And then it gets worse. They go
Oh,
on
it does.
to
Oh,
they go
it
on to
does
talk
get
about
worse.
immigration, and of course, you and I both know that these allegations that people in Springfield, Ohio, are eating, or immigrants are eating dogs and cats and geese. And you hear that stuff online on Twitter, and it could all be traced back to the Laura Loopers of the world, the
Yeah.
crazy conspiracy people. But he picks it up and he runs with it. That's where I finally thought, okay, this is definitely one of those moments of cognitive decline, because no person of sound mind and judgment would possibly bring that up. And again, to your earlier point, he's supposed to be, guy. One of my first bosses always said, politics is a simple game of addition, right? And if I don't know, he couldn't have possibly added any people to his cause, this past Tuesday. But anyway, we go to talking about dogs and cats, and then Kamala just caught off guard. She says, "Okay, that's extreme,"
Yeah.
but she finally got back into it, and again, really took him to task, and he just never did answer the question. I think the question had to do with how are you going to actually round up 11 million? Some people say that there are 15 million undocumented immigrants, and send them back to where they came from. And he never got around to it. He just started talking crazy, and I
Well,
think that's
the worst part about it is I think, and Albert, you watched it a second time, and I watched, like I said, I watched it backwards. So this was towards the end of when this happened. This was towards the end of the night, and so it was well after midnight. So maybe I was a little groggy, but I could have sworn that the question was, when the question was asked, they said, "What are you going to do? Have people go around door to door?" And he said yes. Right? I mean, I'm not mistaken when I'm saying that, right? I mean, he did say that. Like, yeah, and then he went into, whatever rambling answer that he went into. But the initial answer was when he said, "You're going to go have people go door to door." Yes. And it's like, you really think that that's something that's going to happen in this country? Like, that cannot happen in this country. You can't go door to door and round up people. Like, what kind of Byzantine rationale is that?
well, this is where a good debate might have happened, and there is precedent for deportations, and I can only speak to my dad's experiences. I think I've shared with you in the past, Anthony, that
Yeah.
he first came here. I tell people that he started sneaking across the border when he was 13. He lived on the family farm, which was just like less than 50 miles on the other side of the Texas-Mexico border. He shared with me recently the story of how he decided to, come to the States. And because my grandfather was a farmer, they relied on rain and water provided by the government through the canal system to come through. But if it was dry, there was no water coming through the canal system. And so he said that one day, he'll never forget, my grandfather pulled him aside and he said, "Son, if we don't get rain within a week, there won't be a harvest." And you have to, I'm really, I've always been proud of my dad. We're all proud of our fathers, but for him to have that state of mind to be very aware of the moment. Well, a week passed and there was no rain. So my dad decided to hook up with a buddy of his from an adjacent farm, and there were years when there was a great harvest and there was, food was plentiful, and you always save for the next year in case something went bad. But when you have 2, 3, 4 consecutive bad years, you're you're in trouble, much like farmers here in America. So they decided that they were going to come across the Texas and sneak across the border and work at these cattle ranches. So back then, the coyotes that you hear about today, according to my dad, uh, they were more honorable. They actually had it was almost like a business relationship that they had with the Texas ranchers and the farmers. And the rancher would say, "Hey, I need 5 cow hands. Can you get them to me for the spring roundup?" And that's how my dad landed on what is known as the Dolph Briscoe Cattle Ranch. Ironically, Dolph Briscoe at the time was the state house representative in Texas. My dad didn't know it at the time, but it was, I think, the second largest ranch in the state of Texas, probably making it the second largest in the country if you're thinking about it in those terms. My dad landed a gig there as a cowhand because he had experience working with cattle. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about that piece, but just to give our audience a sense of what that immigrant experience is like. My dad constantly was getting deported, but because he was a minor, he wouldn't get processed. And he says that even as a kid, you kind of feel humiliated by the process. You're being told to never come back. One day, he said a border patrol agent that looked like John Wayne, big, tall white man, but he said he spoke perfect Spanish. He told him, "Listen, chamaco," or chamaco is kid in Spanish, said, "You move further north, there is no border patrol up there, and you don't have to worry about getting deported all the time." So my dad, uh, he took the advice, and that's how he landed in Fort Worth, Texas, where I was eventually born. Uh, but those were like the mid '60s, early '70s. Uh, my dad still recounts the raids on job sites, and he remembers one afternoon he got into construction eventually that's when he moved up to Fort Worth. He said there was a line of concrete trucks, mixers. He said as far as the eye could see, we were paving a highway, and the buses started showing up for the raid, and everybody took off. He said there I was. I had just gotten my permit, my green card. So it was, I was home free, but at the same time, I was kind of screwed because I was responsible along with the other guys who were there legally. He says that there is precedent for these types of raids, but he said back then we're not talking about millions. You're probably talking about tens of thousands of
Right.
undocumented immigrants in the state of Texas alone. So now you've got to, it's just not, it's not feasible. There is no way you're going to round up that many people um, and get people to rat on each other. That's not who we are as a country. Um, that's not who we are as Americans. And I think this was a missed opportunity to have that debate. Instead, Trump, the only thing he would talk about was crime and you know I'm not saying crime doesn't exist. It always has existed. It will be with
Right.
us. And
Well, it's the same thing that we keep hearing all the time, and this was another thing that Kamala Harris said at the beginning, where she said it's the same playbook with him. And while you're right, there is a good conversation to be had, and a fair debate to be had about immigration in this country, to to frame it specifically within the fear factor of it is where you lose the ability to have that conversation, because 98% of immigrants in this country, or in the conversation that needs to be had about immigration in this country, has nothing to do with crime or bad people coming in, right? I mean, you're talking about good people, good, who want to experience the quote unquote American dream. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And so therefore to determine if you can figure out how to best handle immigration within the framework of the good people the 98% good people. You will weed out the 2% that are not good or that you don't want here, right? And so, but you got to work with the 98% that exist to begin with, that are good people who want to be here and deserve to be here. That to me, if you can work out policy around those people with the intent of allowing them to be part of our country and part of our community and really experience what it's like to be an American. If you could put all the parameters in place and the policies in place there, you will by default eliminate the other 2% or most of the other 2% that are, the less than desirable folks that you want coming across that border. And I think that's where he completely loses everybody by focusing solely on that part of it, but forgetting that the majority of the people that are coming that we're talking about with immigration are people who really want to come here and start families and live in America and be part of a community. And I think that's where the whole disconnect is. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, Albert, on that. I mean, I'm a white guy, right? So like it's hard for me to be the one saying this, but like you would know better than me. Like if you focus on one side, you can eliminate the problem still, but do it the right way.
You might be a white guy, Anthony, but somewhere along the way, your ancestors who came from, I presume, Italy.
Yes, that is correct.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
Had to deal with the same situation as immigrants are today. Only you're 2-3 generations ahead of the game. So
yes,
but
fair enough.
Hey, I know we're running short on time here, but we'll end on there was that break in between where they pulled Trump out of the race. I'm thinking, okay, he's going to come back now with some real zingers, and he's probably more prepared. But it just continued to go downhill from there. Did you get the same sense, Anthony? Were you like, oh, okay, I'm going to get my popcorn out because he's going to say something that's going to
I
be
thought,
a game changer, maybe?
I no, and he never did. Like I thought the funniest line was when he wants to give her the MAGA hat. Like I thought that was his best. That was his best line. But I mean, even that was not like
I forgot that one.
Yeah, like it was not even that. It wasn't even that good. Like it was like, okay, all right, that's a little jab. But that was not like, we're making all these boxing references. There were no uppercuts. There were no knockouts. It was just a little jab. Like, okay, he got one, but that was it. Like, other than that, like there wasn't anything there. And like, you're right. I was surprised because the one thing that you could always say about Trump at a debate is he's always been a good debater, but B, a guy who says enough things that are memorable that you remember what he did more than the opponent. But he's never been to the point where he was so overwhelmed by the opponent that he was left without even that puncher's chance until this debate. And this was the first time that happened. And I got to imagine that there's a reason he doesn't want to have another debate, because he knows that it would not go well for him.
Yeah, well, next week I have a check-in with the big bosses, right? Like I do every weekend. I'm going to try when they ask me for my quarterly report or whatever it is it's due, I'm going to say, well, I have concepts of a report. I'll let you know. I'll let you know how that goes.
That was the whole podcast. Yeah, that was the whole healthcare thing, right? Concept of a plan.
Have a concept of a plan.
Well, I mean, and it just goes to show, right? I mean, it was, everybody was all the people on the right were always so critical of Obamacare, and did it have its flaws? Certainly, it did. It wasn't perfect, but at the same time, come up with something better, and they couldn't. And that's what he was basically admitting when he said that. Like, yeah, well, we have some ideas. Maybe we can but it doesn't come to fruition. And why doesn't it come to fruition? Because there isn't a better option out there right now. And you can't put one together that's better. So you take what's there, you try and improve with work with what you have, make improvements where you can, and go forward with that, because the Affordable Care Act will work better than anything else that you have, right? I mean, so that's what I took out of that. And so, like, yes, it was funny to sit there and say I have a concept of a plan, but the real story beneath that is the reason you don't have something better is because there isn't something better right now.
Yeah, 9 years later. Okay, folks. I did want to share a special note that our Anthony, my co-host, he likes to use the term facilitator, but let's face it, he's a co-host here. He will be out the next couple of weeks because he's going to be busy. Anthony, you want to share with our audience when you're going to be back and why you're gone, or do you want to keep it a surprise?
No, I don't mind saying. Yeah, I'll be back. So I'm going to miss the next 2 episodes because next Saturday I will be getting married. So thank you. My wonderful bride to be, Maria, and I are going to be getting married in New Jersey instead of here in Philly. We're going across the bridge. Not far, but it's about 15 minutes on the other side of the bridge. But we're
not
at
the Trump Club.
Not not going up there. We're in South Jersey, in a little town called Swedesboro, at a ballroom there. That's where we're going to be having the wedding. And about 140 of our closest friends will be present. So family and friends. So it'll be a good time. It'll be looking forward to it. It's Maria's first wedding, so she's like acting like she's 21 again, as opposed to being 50-year-old that she is. But yeah, no, it's good. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're all looking forward to it. But thank you for the kind words there and mentioning it. But yeah, I'll be out for the next 2 weeks.
Well, we wish you nothing but the best, and we will be here all eagerly awaiting a recap of how the celebration went. To our listeners, don't forget to subscribe. Catch us on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, anywhere you get your podcasts, and please subscribe to YouTube. Share this with your friends. We're going to be getting a little bit more technical over the next few weeks as we wind down. I think we're less than 54 days now before the election. And there's a lot of new tools that are being introduced to the public. We just today announced the release of our voter registration platform where you can track all the latest voter registration trends by state, age group, any type of background you can think of. And it's kind of fun to do as you're sitting there rewatching the debate. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like we're going to get a second debate. But until next week, I am your host with my co-host, Anthony Sanfilippo. We look forward to seeing you next week when we'll have Matt Angle from the Lone Star Project. Until then.